hopefully most people know about these online company review sites, but if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick overview of maybe some of those sites that you're familiar with and what type of information is out there, we'll go ahead and start there.
Absolutely. So I think one of the most popular would be Glassdoor. So Glassdoor, if you don't know what that is, it kind of holds your company information, such as maybe how many employees you might have, what type of industry you're in. If you're not managing it, it's guessing, but it's usually pretty accurate. And it's usually pretty accurate because this is a site that your employees can review you. And so they're giving the information to Glassdoor. And so some of the things that they can review you on would be their salary range. They can discuss maybe how their interview went, what questions they were asked, how they answered those questions. They can review your recruiting process, how they thought that that went, and their general review of maybe what it was, even if they were employed by you. And a lot of times people use these to air their grievances. Before we move on and talk a little bit more about that, Indeed is another one that's pretty similar to Glassdoor. Very, very similar, quite frankly. It asks some questions and allows the employee to, again, review on a variety of things. But ultimately, these platforms allow them not just to answer questions about you, but to type out their sometimes unfiltered thoughts about you. And so one question that often comes up is, "Oh my gosh, Brittany, we got reviewed on Glassdoor, and this employee is just thrashing what they think our work environment is like. And other people may not feel that way, but now if somebody's looking to come work for me, they're looking at this review, and it's probably the first thing they see. And what do I do? Do I respond? Do you have any thoughts about that, Summer? I certainly do.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've definitely used many of these sites in the past for two reasons. One, as a job seeker, to try to get that intel that you described about the company, because if you're going to join a company, then you want to evaluate whatever information is out there that's going to help you with that decision. Now, as you indicated, Brittany, I'm aware that individuals are more likely to go out, and it's similar to Yelp. They're more likely to go out and leave a negative review because they're motivated. They feel like they need to, get back and like they were wronged. So this is their way of like trying to get even. And in using these sites, I think there's a lot of information that you can gather, but as you mentioned, not all of it's entirely accurate. And so I think if you are a business owner and you're not aware of these sites, or you maybe are aware of them, but you aren't actively managing them, you are missing out. So, Brittany, what are your thoughts on how employers should be managing these sites, and what are the dangers to leaving it unmanaged?
Absolutely. So I think first off, how should you be managing it diligently would be if I had to give you a one-word answer, definitely diligently. You want to make sure that these reviews that are being posted, similar to like a Google review for your business, are not just sitting out there waiting for something to happen with them or other people to agree or like or thumbs up or thumbs down them. So I think that it's important to designate one, maybe two people in your business to keep an eye out on this. I think it's important that when you're managing these reviews, specifically negative ones, that part of the process or the procedure even is to not respond immediately. And not because we shouldn't respond soon, but because we don't want to respond in emotion. We don't wanna respond without de-escalating ourselves, and maybe even talking to leadership depending what that review might just say. So in regards to diligently, doesn't necessarily mean right this second. The other thing that is really important when dealing with these reviews is to really take them seriously, but also understand who's writing them. These people worked for you. So keep that in mind, be considerate of those things. And when you finally get to the point that you're going to respond, we want to respond very professionally if that's what you choose to do, and make sure that we're not airing any private information in those responses.
It is so important to manage these. And that's why I felt like this is a topic to share with our listeners because for a company that's doing nothing, if you're having trouble recruiting, then that's definitely an area to look at. Are you doing all of the work to actually identify and interview candidates? But then when they get to some of those final stages, they're reading all kinds of drama about your company online, and that's making them have second thoughts. And so, it makes me think about really Yelp or even on Facebook where there's an ad and, maybe there's less than pleasant comments about the product. What you will typically see is a professional response that doesn't escalate the issue, but instead acknowledges, the unhappiness or dissatisfaction. And like in the case of somebody who is maybe unhappy with a product online, they will de-escalate it by say, please contact us at such and such email to, further resolve your problem. So, it is that acknowledgement that other people are seeing that hopefully, despite, maybe a negative review, the reader is saying, well, but if the company's taking the time to respond, then that means that this is important to them and that they care. And so maybe it's not as bad as the employee actually said that it is. So I wanted to talk a little bit too about the strategies that companies can use to leverage these sites to their benefit, because we have talked about how to manage those negative responses, but Brittany, what about companies who might want to focus their efforts on one or two of these sites, since there's just too many to try to tackle, and use them to their benefit to get positive reviews? How would a company go about that?
Absolutely. I think that the best place to start to go about that is obviously with your current employees. So there's nothing wrong with asking your current employees to go, and if they feel compelled, to write a review. Talk about the positives. Maybe somebody has a big win, or maybe somebody talks about how great the team is, or whatever. Talk to them and say, "Would you mind? This is a great place to talk about how we can bring more like-minded people into our company." The other place that's a really great place to do this is in exit interviews, which I could have a whole episode on why I love exit interviews, but we won't hijack the show today, I promise. But exit interviews are such a good place to, one, learn what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. But when you learn what you're doing right and you have somebody who maybe is just leaving for, maybe they're moving, or maybe the next step in their career just can't be with your business, but they love their time there. You learn it in the exit interview, and then there's your ask right there. Could you please go on Glassdoor? We love that you shared this with us. We want others to hear about your experience here with us, and just ask. So there's, doesn't have to be salesy, it doesn't have to be not genuine, but use those opportunities when you see a current staff member in a win, or those exit interviews when you've got that really positive one. Ask them to go. Put that positive review up there so others can see the great things that are happening in your business.
One of the success stories that I wanted to share about this was a company who was very intentional about collecting reviews. And so, as part of their onboarding process, they determined that a certain interval, whether that was 90 days or the 6-month point, that they were going to ensure that every single new hire received an email, and that email was dual purpose. One, it was to check in with them from an HR standpoint, just see how they're doing, see if there's anything that we could help them with. And in many cases, they'd respond back and just say, like, thanks for the email. No, I'm good. Or, oh, yeah, by the way, I meant to contact you for this. So we, continue to build that relationship, like HR to the team, in a culture where like HR was kind of seen as like being evil. So it's like, wow, like maybe HR isn't so evil. And part of that outreach was, hey, if you've enjoyed your time working with us, then we would love to get your feedback. If you could just take a couple of minutes, here's the link. If you have some challenges, just respond to this email and then let's talk them out. So it's trying to get in front of somebody leaving and then airing their grievance online. And hopefully, if you are consistent with that, you will start to gain positive reviews. I think you have to expect you're going to get the occasional negative review and you respond to it just as we indicated you would. And now these sites are now being used to your advantage. So I want, if you're a business owner, to think about if your competitor is neglecting their employer review site and you're managing yours and yours has stellar reviews, theirs has nothing but complaints and no responses. What type of advantage do you think that's going to give you? I think it's going to be a pretty good one. And Brittleigh, while we have just a few more minutes before wrapping today's show, do you have any other thoughts on this topic?
All I have to say, Summer, is doing this in onboarding is such an interesting thing to do, and I really like that. I actually hadn't thought of that, so here I am in our podcast learning a little bit more, and I think that I just wanna push that a little further in that I really think businesses should consider it because 'cause you're right, you will get from time to time maybe that negative review, so that risk is there in asking everyone, but even the negative review then becomes a positive for you because you know the negative upfront in the early stages. Maybe we can correct it. By the way, those can be edited. So we can always go back, correct what's wrong for this employee, create longevity for them, and then maybe they'll change it later. Maybe they'll be able to turn that negative into a positive and it's a win win all the way around. So Summer, really, I thank you for sharing that because it's not something that I myself had considered.
Well, that makes me so happy because, as you know, in HR and really in running a business, there are so many different ways to tackle different challenges. There's, so many different solutions. But I think that each company needs to determine what's going to work best for them. But the biggest takeaway is have a plan versus not having a plan and be consistent, and the results will come.